The elevator doors opened and Rowan Pierce stepped out into the 42nd floor with his cane touching the marble 3 inches to the left of where it needed to be. He had practiced the 3 inches. Too far left looked theatrical. Too accurate looked suspicious. 3 inches left of necessary was the specific calibration of a man who could not see but had learned the general geography of a space through repetition. And it was exactly convincing enough to be believed by people who had no reason to look closely and every reason to look away. The floor went quiet. Not all at once. In the specific sequential way that silence travels through an open-plan office, person by person, desk by desk, as the information passed from the people nearest the elevator outward to the people at the windows, until the entire 42nd floor of Pierce Capital had absorbed the fact of what had just come out of the elevator and was processing it with the particular quality of attention that people give to things they did not expect and do not know yet how to respond to. Theo was blind. Rowan heard the silence the way he had learned to hear most things in the past 3 weeks, not as an absence of sound but as information. The silence told him the floor was approximately 60% occupied at this hour, that the desks nearest the elevator bank were the executive assistant cluster based on the quality of the furniture sounds he had mapped on his first day, and that the specific silence had the texture of shock rather than recognition, which meant the internal memo his communications director had sent had reached everyone except the people it most needed to reach, which was consistent with the pattern he had been documenting. He moved through the floor slowly. The cane found the edge of a desk that was 3 inches closer to the walkway than the floor plan indicated, which meant someone had moved it, which he filed without altering his pace. A woman to his left said too brightly, "Mr. Pierce, can I help you find your office?" "I know where my office is," he said pleasantly. "But thank you, Daniela." A beat of silence that contained her surprise at being known by name. He kept walking. Subscribe to this channel right now if you are new here. Because what Rowan Pierce is about to find in this building is going to change everything, and you need to be here from the beginning. To understand why the CEO of Pierce Capital had returned to his own company wearing dark glasses and carrying a cane he did not need, you have to understand what had been troubling him for the 4 months before the decision. Rowan Pierce was 44 years old and had built his company from a single correct conviction held at a moment when holding it required more confidence than evidence supported. He had been right, and the rightness had compounded across 15 years into an asset management firm with $11 billion under management and a reputation in the market for the specific quality that Rowan valued most in any institution, which was that it did what it said it would do. He had built a culture around this. He had hired for it, compensated for it, and removed people who could not maintain it with the efficiency of a man for whom the culture was not a marketing document but the actual operating principle of everything. Something had changed. He could not point to the specific moment. It was more gradual than a moment, more like the slow shift in a foundation that produces no single dramatic event but that a person who pays close attention begins to feel in the way the building responds to ordinary loads. The numbers were right. The reports were thorough. The executive team presented well and communicated on schedule, and the company by every documented metric was performing within acceptable parameters. But the numbers were too right. Rowan had been in finance long enough to understand that perfection in reported figures was not evidence of good performance. It was evidence of good reporting. Real operations produced friction, variance, the specific irregularity of things that were actually happening rather than things that were being described as happening. His company's internal reports had developed, over the past 2 quarters, a smoothness that bothered him the way a room bothers you when you cannot identify what has been moved but know that something has. He had gone to his head of internal audit with 3 specific questions and received 3 answers that were technically responsive and substantively evasive in the way that technically responsive answers are evasive when the person giving them has something to protect. He had gone to 2 board members and had 2 conversations that left him more certain that something was wrong and less certain about who knew it. He had spent a week deciding what to do. The decision, when it arrived, had the specific quality of decisions that come from a place deeper than strategy. He was going to go back into his own company and look at it the way it could not be looked at from the CEO's office, from the position of a person that powerful people ignored and ordinary people treated without performance, from the position of someone that the company did not know was watching. He had a condition that made this possible. Not blindness. He had perfect vision. What he had was a brother who had been blind from birth and who had, across a lifetime of Rowan watching and sometimes helping, given him an education in the specific behaviors and patterns of a sighted person navigating without sight that was thorough enough to be convincing under ordinary observation. He had spent 2 weeks practicing. He had consulted with his brother, who found the entire enterprise both useful and mildly amusing. He had developed the 3-inch calibration and the cane movement and the specific quality of stillness that a person uses when they are processing a space orally rather than visually. Then he had sent the memo announcing that he was returning to the office following a medical situation that had resulted in temporary loss of vision, and he had come back and he had begun to watch. Comment below right now if you already see where this is going. Because the office is already showing him more than he expected. The first week produced the categories. He had expected the categories in broad terms. What he had not expected was the speed with which they revealed themselves, the way the presence of a perceived vulnerability in the most powerful person in the building acted like a solvent that dissolved the performance layer of the office culture and showed what was underneath it with almost no delay. The first category was the performers, the people who became demonstrably warmer and more helpful in his presence than they were at any other time, whose kindness had the specific quality of something being displayed rather than given. He heard them in the way their voices shifted register when they noticed him, the professional warmth dialing up like a light on a dimmer switch. He noted them not as good or bad but as people whose helpfulness was conditional on an audience. The second category was the opportunists. These were subtler and more interesting. They were the people who, in the presence of what they perceived as reduced oversight, made small adjustments to their behavior that were each individually minor and collectively significant. Conversations that moved to the far side of the floor when he was nearby. Decisions made in hallways that should have been made in meetings. The specific administrative looseness of people who have recalibrated their sense of what is being watched. The third category was the indifferent. These were the people who treated him with the same quality of attention they gave everyone, neither more helpful because he seemed to need it nor less careful because he seemed unable to see them. He noted these people with particular interest because the indifferent were, in his experience, usually either the most honest or the most thoroughly checked out, and distinguishing between the two was worth the time. Then there was Lena Cole. She was junior staff, 3 years with the company in the financial analysis division on the 42nd floor. He encountered her first on his third day, in the small kitchen near the copy room, where he had gone because he had learned that the small kitchen near the copy room was where the unguarded conversations happened, the ones that did not relocate to the far side of the floor when he came near. He had been standing near the counter, processing a conversation happening in the hallway that he needed to hear more of, when he knocked a cup off the counter with his elbow. Not accidentally. He needed a reason to be standing there for another 40 seconds. She was beside him before the cup finished landing. "I've got it," she said, not in the bright overperformed register of the first category, just in the ordinary voice of a person who has seen something that needs doing and is doing it. She picked up the cup, checked it for damage, placed it back on the counter. "There's a chair to your left if you want to sit while you wait for the coffee. The machine takes about 3 minutes and the room gets a bit crowded." "I'm all right," he said. "Suit yourself," she said, and went back to what she was doing, which was making tea with the focused attention of a person who was not using the interaction to perform anything. He stood there for his 40 seconds and got what he needed from the hallway conversation and came back the next day. He told himself it was because the kitchen was strategically located. This was partly true. Like this video if you already understand why Lena is different from everyone else on this floor. Because she is about to become the most important person in the building. She questioned him on the 6th day. Not directly, not in the way of someone confronting something. In the way of someone whose mind has been running a quiet analysis and has arrived at a conclusion she is not certain what to do with. They were in the hallway outside the document room and she had been walking beside him to the elevator, which had become something that happened without either of them deciding it would happen, and she said without particular lead-up, "You navigate this floor really well for someone who's only been back 3 days." He kept his pace steady. "I've worked here for 15 years. The muscle memory is different from the visual memory." "That's true," she said. "But you knew my name the first time I spoke to you and I've never been introduced to you." "I read personnel files," he said. "Junior analysts," she said. "All of them," he said. She was quiet for a moment. Not the silence of someone who has been satisfied but the silence of someone who has filed the answer in the provisional category and is keeping the question open. "All right," she said. She pressed the elevator button for him. He thanked her. She said it was no trouble and went back down the hallway. He stood at the elevator for a moment after she left with the specific quality of a man recalibrating something. He was smart. He had known she was smart from the third day, from the quality of the observation she made in the kitchen and the economy of the words she used to make it. What the sixth day added was that she was honest in the specific way of people who trust their own perception enough to act on it, which was a quality that was rarer than intelligence and, in the current context, considerably more dangerous to his operation. He would need to be more careful. He was also, for reasons he was not ready to examine, glad she had asked. The financial inconsistencies had been becoming clearer with each day on the floor. Not because the documents had changed but because he was reading them now with the specific context of overheard conversations and observed behaviors and the particular intelligence that comes from watching people who believe they are not being watched. 3 senior executives, his CFO Marcus Hale, his head of operations Derek Sohn, and a board-level advisor named Claire Vestry, had been in conversations across the 2 weeks that formed a picture he could now see with sufficient clarity to name. They were moving money. Not dramatically. Not in the crude way of people who were inexperienced at this. In the sophisticated way of people who understood the architecture of a financial institution well enough to create movements that looked like ordinary operations at any single point of examination and revealed themselves as a pattern only when held together. He estimated, based on the overheard figures, that the amounts were significant, running into 8 figures across 2 quarters, distributed across a set of subsidiary accounts that were legitimate individually and formed a pipeline collectively. He had begun documenting on day 4. By day 12 he had enough. What he did not yet have was the full scope of the plan that the 3 of them had been discussing in the hallway outside the document room on the morning of the 8th day, the conversation he had positioned himself to hear from the kitchen, the one that had gone further than financial movement into territory that required him to revise his understanding of what he was dealing with. They were not just moving money. They were preparing to move him. The conversation had the specific structure of people who have planned something thoroughly and are reviewing the final sequence. A board meeting had been called for the following week. The agenda as he had received it was routine. The actual agenda, as the 3 of them discussed it in the hallway with the confidence of people who believed they were alone, was the formal presentation of a governance review that had been prepared by an external consultancy the board had not commissioned, which was going to raise questions about Rowan's capacity to lead in his current medical condition, and which had been structured to produce a specific outcome. They were going to use his blindness to take his company. Drop a comment right now if this just shifted the entire story for you. Because it shifted Lena's story too. She came to him on the 14th day. She came to his office in the late afternoon when the floor had thinned to the people working late and the executive cluster had gone to the dinner that 3 of them had on Thursday evenings. A detail Rowan knew and had factored into his schedule. She knocked on the open door and said his name and he turned toward the door with the 3-inch calibration and said come in. She sat in the chair across from his desk. He heard the specific quality of her sitting, the way a person sits when they are about to say something they are not certain how it will be received and have decided to say it anyway. I need to tell you something, she said. And I want to say up front that I understand if you think I'm overstepping. I'm junior staff and this is not my lane and I know that. Tell me, he said. I've been working on the Q3 reconciliation for the Aldrin subsidiary accounts, she said. It's not my assigned work. I was asked to help cover for someone who was out sick last week and the accounts I was given access to, they don't reconcile correctly. Not by accident. The pattern of the discrepancy is too consistent to be error. He was very still. I ran it 3 times, she said. Different methodology each time. The result is the same. Money is moving through these accounts in a way that doesn't correspond to any approved transaction record I can find, and the amounts are significant enough that I don't think I can sit on this without telling someone. Pause. I also found a document in the shared drive. It wasn't addressed to me and I wasn't looking for it, but it was in a folder I had access to and the title was ambiguous enough that I opened it before I understood what it was. She paused again. It's a consultancy report. About the company's leadership capacity. It's going to the board next week. Rowan said nothing. I don't know what's happening, she said. I don't know how much of this you're aware of or whether I'm telling you something you already know or something that's going to make things more complicated for you. But you're the CEO and I work here and someone is doing something wrong with this company's money and there is a document going to your board that I think is going to be used against you and I couldn't not tell you. Silence. Why? He said. She paused. Why what? Why are you telling me? You said yourself it's not your lane. The risk of raising this is yours entirely. If the people involved are senior enough and they are, the cost of being the person who flagged it falls on you regardless of the outcome. So why? She was quiet for a moment. Because it's wrong, she said simply. Not complicated wrong. Just wrong. And I've worked here for 3 years and I believe this company is worth working for when it's working the way it's supposed to work. And sitting on something like this because it's not my lane would make me the kind of person I don't want to be. He looked at her. Not with the 3-inch calibration. Directly. She did not notice. Or if she noticed, she did not name it yet. Thank you, Lena, he said. I need you to send me everything you found. Every document, every reconciliation run, the consultancy report. Send it to a personal email address I'm going to give you rather than the company system. Tonight if you can. All right, she said. And I need you to tell no one. Not because I'm not taking it seriously. Because I am. I understand, she said. She stood. Moved toward the door. Then stopped. Mr. Pierce. Yes. Are you actually blind? The question arrived in the room with the specific quality of something that has been held for several days and is now being released because the moment has made itself available. He was quiet for 3 seconds. No, he said. She absorbed this. He watched her absorb it, watched the pieces of the past 2 weeks assembling themselves into the correct picture behind her eyes. Everything you've been doing, she said. The floor. The kitchen. The conversations. Yes. You were watching what people did when they thought you couldn't see them. Yes. She was quiet for a moment with the expression of a woman running a complete recalculation. Then she said, Did I pass? You weren't being tested, he said. You were being real. That's not the same thing. She looked at him for one more second. Then she nodded once with the specific quality of a person who has received a piece of information that will require some time to fully process and has decided that processing it now is not the priority. I'll send the files tonight, she said. She left. Subscribe right now because the boardroom scene is next and it is worth being here for every second of it. The board meeting was called for Tuesday at 10. The agenda that the board members had received listed 4 items of routine business and a 5th described as a governance review presentation from an external advisory firm. Rowan had reviewed this agenda on the Friday before in his office, with his glasses on and his cane in the corner where it had been sitting for 3 days, and he had made 3 phone calls that afternoon and 2 more on Saturday and 1 on Monday morning. And by Monday afternoon the picture of what was going to happen in the boardroom on Tuesday was clear enough to prepare for. He arrived at the boardroom at 9:45. He arrived without his glasses. Without his cane. In the suit he wore when he needed a room to understand immediately what category of conversation it was in. He sat at the head of the table, which was where he always sat and where no one had moved his nameplate despite the 2 weeks of not sitting there, and he placed his hands on the table and he waited. Marcus Hale was the first of the 3 to arrive. He came in with the specific confidence of a man who believes the day has been prepared correctly and is ready to proceed. He saw Rowan at the head of the table and his pace changed in the way pace changes when a body receives unexpected information before the mind has produced the appropriate response. Rowan, he said. You're early. I'm always early, Rowan said. You know that. Hale sat at his usual position and took out his materials with the performed normality of a man re-establishing his composure in real time. Sohn and Vestry arrived together, which Rowan noted. Together was a choice on a morning like this, a choice that communicated more than they intended. They saw him and produced the same fractional hesitation that Hale had produced, and they sat and they arranged their materials, and the remaining board members filed in over the next 10 minutes and the room filled with the specific quality of a meeting about to begin. The first 3 agenda items were conducted efficiently. Rowan moved through them at his usual pace, asking the questions he always asked, receiving the answers, making the decisions that were his to make. He gave the room nothing that suggested today was different from any other Tuesday. When the 4th item was concluded he looked at the agenda. Item 5, he said. I understand we have a presentation from an external advisory firm. He looked up. Marcus, I believe this is yours. Hale looked at him. Something in his expression was working to remain neutral and not fully succeeding. That's right, he said. The firm was engaged to conduct an independent review of operational leadership continuity given the recent circumstances. Which firm? Rowan said. A beat. Castellan Advisory. Castellan Advisory, Rowan said. Interesting. I've never worked with them. When were they engaged? 6 weeks ago, Hale said. Before my medical situation was known to the board, Rowan said. The quality of the room changed. Rowan, Vestry said with the smooth intervention of a woman who has prepared for turbulence. The review was initiated in response to some operational concerns that predated your situation. The timing is coincidental. Is it? Rowan said. Not a question. He reached into the folder in front of him and removed 3 documents. He placed them on the table and slid them to the center. The first document, he said, is a reconciliation analysis of the Aldrin subsidiary accounts across Q2 and Q3. It was prepared by a member of my financial analysis team and independently verified by an external forensic accounting firm over the past 4 days. It documents a systematic movement of funds totaling $43 million across a period of 7 months through a series of accounts that are individually legitimate and collectively constitute a pattern of financial misappropriation. He looked at Hale. Your name appears in the authorization chain on 11 of the transactions. Hale said nothing. The second document, Rowan said, is the Castellan Advisory Report. The copy in front of you is annotated with the metadata from the shared drive where it was stored, which shows it was created 6 weeks ago and last modified 4 days before my medical announcement, which is consistent with having been prepared in anticipation of a condition that had not yet been disclosed, which raises questions about how Castellan Advisory knew what condition to write about. The room was completely still. The third document is a communication log, Rowan said, between 3 email addresses that route, through 2 intermediary services, to accounts registered to the individuals in this room who are the subject of the first 2 documents. He looked at the 3 of them. Not with anger. With the specific calm of a man who has done the preparation and is now conducting the execution. The communications document a plan to use the Castellan report to initiate a governance challenge at this meeting, remove me from operational control pending a capacity review, and install an interim leadership structure during which the financial movements already in progress would be completed and the audit trail closed. Sohn said, Rowan, I think you should understand the context before. I understand the context precisely, Rowan said. I have understood it for 2 weeks. He removed his glasses from his jacket pocket and put them on the table in front of him. The dark glasses. The ones he had worn every day for 14 days. I am not blind, he said. I have never been blind. What I have been for the past 2 weeks is present in this building in a form that none of you recognized as observation, and in that time I have watched this company with the specific attention that is available to a person that powerful people have decided is no longer worth performing for. He looked at the 3 of them in turn. You showed me exactly who you were. I am grateful for the clarity. No one spoke. Your access to company systems was revoked at 7 this morning, Rowan said. Your employment is terminated effective today with cause, the documentation for which your legal teams will receive before the end of business. The board will vote on the confirmation of interim replacements before this meeting concludes. He looked at the room. I want the remaining board members to understand that the documentation I've presented today is complete and has been filed with the appropriate regulatory bodies as of Monday. This is not a negotiation. It is a conclusion. He looked at Hale. At Sohn. At Vestry. Not with satisfaction. With the specific quality of a man who has done what needed doing and finds no pleasure in the cost of needing to do it. You may leave, he said. Like this video right now if that boardroom just gave you exactly what you came for. Because what happens after the boardroom is the part that matters most. The floor was different on Wednesday. Not dramatically different. Not in the visible way of a place that has had something dramatic happen and is in the performance of adjusting. In the quieter way of a place that has had something true happen and is recalibrating toward it. The conversations were at normal volume. The desks were where they were supposed to be. The people who had been in the first category, the performers, moved with the specific quality of people who understood that the audience they had been performing for could see through the performance and were trying to figure out what to do with that information. Rowan walked the floor without the cane for the first time. It felt like the floor he had built. That was the specific sensation. Something restored to its accurate form after having been seen in distorted form for long enough that the accurate form was worth noticing. He found Lena at her desk in the financial analysis section, working through something on her screen with the focused attention she brought to work that required it. She looked up when he stopped beside her desk and she looked at him, the version of him that was visible now, without the glasses and without the calibration and without the performance, just the man who had been watching the building for 2 weeks from a position that required her to be the kind of person she had turned out to be. The documents you sent, he said. The reconciliation work. The analysis was thorough. It's what the numbers said, she said. I know, he said. That's what made it valuable. You didn't interpret it toward a conclusion. You let it be what it was and reported accurately. She looked at him. Is it over? The people responsible are gone, he said. The regulatory process will take time. But yes. The thing you helped stop is stopped. She nodded. Then, with the direct quality that he had noted on the 6th day and had been noting every day since, what happens to me? What do you mean? I gave confidential documents to the CEO through a private email address outside the company system, she said. In most interpretations of company policy, that's a terminable action regardless of the content. He looked at her for a moment. You reported suspected financial fraud to the CEO of the company, he said. You're the person who was honest when no one was watching and competent when it mattered, and I don't have a category for letting that go. She held his gaze with the direct quality he had come to understand was not boldness but simply her default operating mode, the way an accurate person looks at the world without filtering it for palatability. What category do you have for it? Head of Internal Financial Review, he said. It's a new position. It didn't exist before this week because this week showed me I needed it. She was quiet for a moment. I'm junior staff. You were junior staff, he said. Yesterday. She looked at the desk. Then at him. The expression of a person deciding whether to receive something that is real or to manage it back to a more comfortable size. She chose to receive it. He could see her choose it. All right, she said. All right, he said. He walked back through the floor to his office, and he walked without the calibration, without the performance, without the 3-inch deviation and the cane and the dark glasses and the elaborate architecture of a man making himself invisible to see what visibility concealed. He walked as himself, which was what he had been the entire time, and the floor received him with the specific quality of a space that now understood it was occupied by someone who could see it accurately. Not performing. Actually seeing. There is a category of person that every institution needs and almost no institution knows how to find. The person who does the right thing when the cost is real and the audience is absent and the calculation of self-interest would produce a different answer. Institutions usually discover these people by accident, in the moment when the right thing needed doing and the person either did it or did not. The discovery is valuable. The accident is expensive. Rowan Pierce had designed the accident. He sat in his office on Wednesday afternoon and looked at the floor through the glass wall. The people at their desks doing the ordinary work of an institution that was still standing because the right things had been done at the right moments. And he thought about what 14 days in the company had shown him that 15 years in the company had not. The most important information about an institution is not in its documents. It is in the behavior of its people when they believe the documents are not watching. The corruption had been visible in every conversation near the kitchen and every relocated discussion and every adjusted desk and every performance that dialed up when the perceived authority arrived. It had been visible the whole time. He simply had not been positioned to see it. Position is everything. He would not make the same mistake in the same direction again. Not because he planned to maintain a permanent deception but because the principle the deception had demonstrated was permanently true. What people did when they believed they were unobserved was the most accurate available data about who they were, and a leader who did not have access to that data was leading a version of the institution that existed only in the documents. Lena Cole had not been performing when she brought him the documents. She had not been calculating. She had been doing what she did when no one was watching, which was the same thing she did when everyone was watching, which was the specific quality of a person who does not have two operating modes but one, and that one is oriented toward what is right rather than what is observed. He had not promoted her because she had impressed him. He had promoted her because she had been real. There is a difference. The difference is everything. Share this story right now with someone who needs to be reminded that how you behave when no one is watching is who you actually are. Subscribe to this channel because this is the kind of storytelling we build here, and there is more coming that will stay with you. Drop a comment below and tell us which moment in this story hit you the hardest. And if you have been here since the elevator doors opened and the cane touched the marble 3 inches to the left of where it needed to be, thank you. These stories exist because you stay for all of it. The office feels different now. Less polished. More honest. Rowan Pierce walks through it without a cane and without dark glasses and without the performance of a man making himself small enough to see clearly. He does not need to anymore. Because now everyone in the building knows. He sees everything.